Okay, we should be live. Let's see if everything is working properly as usual. Okay, in theory, everything should be working. So, ciao everyone and welcome back to another episode of Learn Italian with Songs. Today we keep going with the album Natura Morta by Folkstone. Specifically, we are going to talk about the 8th track, which is Fragile. And we start the section of the album which gathers together all the featurings. The featurings of the album are 4, and this is the first one, specifically with an Italian band called Modena City Ramblers. Now, as you might have noticed from the title, you could imagine the main topic of this song, fragility. In fact, fragile just means fragile. But as usual, the point is, what's the perspective? We should remember, like, generally, since we talked about many other tracks until now, that the whole point of Natura Morta is to find the balance between the negative and positive aspects. So a little bit of a collateral beauty sort of concept, where even when things are not going that good, it's okay to point them out, but also see what's positive in that context. So, generally, each track focuses on a main topic, but generally, this point of view, this perspective is what connects all the tracks. Now, as I was saying, this song is about fragility, but seen as something positive. In fact, fragility is part of the human nature, and it is also something we need to have because it is one of the things making us humans. However, for the first time, I managed to see a little bit of controversy concerning this song, not for the theme in itself, but for how the song is built. But we're going to talk about it at the end in the conclusions, because I don't want to influence you too much. For now, just so you know, this song is more pop than the others. Of course, Folkstone, as we said several times, is a metal band, rock metal, and thus, of course, what we expect from this band is metal songs, both in the lyrics and in the music. In this song, however, we can see in the lyrics, in the music, in the lyric structure, in the vibe, generally speaking, of the song, that it is much more like it's closer to a pop song, okay? And that was the center of some discussions, but as I said, I don't want to influence you too much concerning this point, so let's just check the lyrics. So, we start with a first verse. We'll see a first verse, a chorus, a second verse, another chorus, a bridge, and then the chorus once again. However, all the sections of the song are quite short. I'll show you. Let's start with the first verse, as I was saying. Sconvolte, shaken, le notti tra le mie follie, the nights among my follies. Fermarsi, stopping, perché quel vuoto ha vinto, because that emptiness won. Le stagioni hanno colmato quell'assenza. The seasons filled that absence. La distanza poi mi si è cucita addosso. the distance, then sweet self onto me. So, now, fragility. Where is the fragility here? Well, we have the start of the tale of the narrative, which is basically the group, our protagonist, saying that they went through several follies, they had crazy times in the night. Why? Probably referring to when they were younger and they were singing and playing together. And of course, usually the performances, at least you can see often performances happening at night, mainly if you are more niche, because many niche groups don't do that as a main job. So while during the day they work, during the night they are going to perform. And then stopping. Why? Now, I can be 100% sure because, as usual, the verses are quite cryptic and open to several interpretations, because this is pretty much the point of the songs. But in the case of Folkstone, and in this case and context, I think that this might be a reference to when they disbanded. In fact, Natura Morta by Folkstone came out after they came back together, because some years ago they released an album, they did a tour, and then they disbanded. But why? Because the emptiness won, il vuoto ha vinto. What is this emptiness? In several interviews, they explained that they didn't disband because they argued, or often when we have bands disbanding is because there are contrast, discussions, arguments happening among the members. In this case, however, they explained that they were totally cool with each other, but the issue is that they couldn't really find the inspiration to make more music, and that was a problem. And it wasn't their style to just force out content that they didn't feel as theirs. And so at that point they prefer to disband, because it's better than losing your essence, losing who you are as a band. And this is where we find the fragility, the flow of humankind, which in this case is simply not being able to be creative, having lack of creativity, of inspiration, which can happen. Many people working in the entertainment industry, artists and whatnot, know very well that that emptiness, just the absence of inspiration. And of course, if you try to force something out of that, the quality of your products is a bit lost. And then the season fill that absence, where in this case the season represents the time. So what are they saying? They are saying that they had good times, they played, they did crazy things, they did great things, then they stopped because of that emptiness. Then time passed, and feel that absence, that lacking of creativity and inspiration. And then we have the last line, which is the distance, then suit itself into me. Now, this is quite cryptic, but I guess it's a reference to everything that was said before. So probably a sort of acceptance of this emptiness. So now we are back, we can be creative again, but I also know that we won't be like we were before. So there is a difference sued onto me that is not going to pass. We changed, we accepted the change, and we accepted that we are not going to be the same of when we were having the crazy nights together, which makes sense, very human, very understandable. Then we have the chorus. which, as you might have noticed, is very short. Once again, even the first verse wasn't that long. And then we have the chorus. Non mi hai tradito mai. You never betrayed me. Forte compagnia. Strong company. Non ti ho mai detto addio. I never said goodbye to you. Fragile. Fragile. So, here we have this human fragility addressed directly, almost personificated. Also, there is an inversion because usually in Italian we say more often non mi hai mai tradito. Of course, as we said several times, in songs, mainly metal songs, which are closer to poetry, we have often inversion of the syntactic structure of the language. So in this case is non mi hai tradito mai. Probably the mai, never, is also put at the end to stress how important is this element in the sentence, because usually if you want to underline how important is an element in a sentence, you either put it at the beginning or at the end, more in a verse than in a sentence, actually. And we have another clear example of double negation, because non mai, so like not, never, and it keeps being negative, and in fact, you never betrayed me. Forte compagnia, strong company. What is this strong company? Like that element that is with us and that makes us stronger in a sort of way, that doesn't betray us, that we are not going to let go. It's our fragility, and in fact, fragile is an adjective, so probably it's implied la parte fragile di me, the fragile part of me, because the noun would be fragilità. So probably due to syllable counts and rhythm necessity, they prefer to use the adjective and imply the rest, but pretty much in the chorus we have explicited the whole point of fragility, seen as something positive, because it's something that doesn't betray, that keeps us company, because of course it reminds us that we are human beings, and in a certain way we are allowed to feel fragile. And in fact, here our narrator say, we never said, like I never said goodbye to you, like we never parted ways. And then there is the second verse. Has the same exact structure and length of the first verse and says ritagli, scraps, di suoni storti e parodie, of crooked sounds and parodies, avanzi, leftovers, per chi rovista nelle tenebre, for those who rummage in the darkness, come un fiore in una crepa nell'asfalto, like a flower in a crack in the asphalt, calpestato, mira dritto all'universo. Trampled, it aims or aspires, because mirare as a verb in Italian has a double meaning, straight at the universe. Now, some notes, ritagli, which are the scraps, is literally coming from the verb tagliare, to cut, because it is what, it's not that easy to translate it, because in English, scraps has a negative connotation by default. While ritaglio in Italian, it's something just you cut. Here I put scraps because from the context I would say that all this description has quite of a negative connotation, like we are talking about something seen as negative, something problematic. And that's why it's like ritagli as in scraps, also because we have the other word, because as you can see, we have one word verse and then several words verses, so 1 2 1 2, and ritagli matches avanzi. So in this way, we don't have the whole picture, but only pieces of it, ritagli, scraps. Now, we have scraps, crooked sounds, parodies, leftovers, the action of rummaging in the darkness. So all things that are seen as negative, like perceived as negative usually. Now, what's the point here? Probably a reference to the issues mentioned in the first verse. So the lack of creativity, because you can't put something together because you are not inspired. So the content you are making feels like a bunch of scraps, crooked sounds, because of course here who's talking? Musicians. Parodies, so something that is the bad copy of itself, leftovers, rummaging in the darkness, so like blindly looking for something because it represents that feeling of not being able to even know where to look for a solution, for inspiration, like this feeling of being lost. And it pictures quite well this whole point, this whole issue of feeling the lack of creativity, the lack of inspiration, because you may be able to do something, but not that much in the end, and everything you do kind of feels like something incomplete, the parody of itself, a crooked sound, a scrap, a leftover, and you feel like you are rummaging in the darkness, so looking for someone for something in complete darkness, so picturing this difficulty of finding and feeling lost. However, then the perspective changes a bit in the last two lines, because we have like a flower in a crack in the asphalt, trampled, it aims or aspires straight at the universe. Now, nothing new. The image of the flower, the plant, whatever, able to bloom in the asphalt, so in the concrete, there are several versions of this image, is like something likely so fragile, at the same time so beautiful, able to bloom and break the asphalt, probably in this case representing this lack of creativity, this emptiness feeling. Also because the asphalt is often related to this feeling of being blocked, okay? And also we have the flower because as we saw in several tracks, the image of nature is seen as something positive, in an opposite perception to what is artificial and industrial. So in this case, the asphalt. So nature winning, triumphing over industrialization in a sort of way. And then we have that when the flower is trampled, it looks directly towards the sky, so the universe. Again, beautiful image, but really nothing that so new. Let's put it like that. And then we have a variation of the chorus. Why a variation? Doesn't change much, it's just a little bit longer. So we have once again, non mi hai tradito mai, you never betrayed me, forte compagnia, strong company, non ti ho mai detto addio, I never said goodbye to you. And in the previous version we had just fragile. Here we stop and then we have the repetition of the first three lines. And then finally the addition of fragile. That's why I'm saying, yes, it's a variation, but it doesn't change much and it doesn't add that much. So it's really a minimal variation which consists in a repetition, which is understandable, but something you would expect more in a pop song. And then we have the bridge. Per ogni porta chiusa in faccia, for every door closed in my face, in the face, ho scritto frasi che ancora urlerò. I wrote sentences that I will still shout. Quelle vibrazioni sotto pelle, those vibration under the skin. Of course, here we keep having reference to music because, of course, the artists speaking here are musicians. And we have the very common metaphor of, oh, even if I have doors closed in my face, so I got rejected several times, these prompted me to write more verses that I'm going to scream, like this whole idea of freedom, the scream and the war cry almost. And then the vibration under the skin, so these can be a reference to whatever feeling that really excites you. So we have like the shivers of like anger, because of course here we are describing a situation where they get rejected, but also being inspired by this very rejection because like, oh, I'm going to work even harder now, and so on and so on and so on. As usual, these type of image can be adapted to several interpretation, and that's the point, because of course since it's not that specific, the line, it can be interpreted in several ways and should be interpreted in several ways, because the whole point is to give an idea of all those feelings you feel when you are rejected but you want to work even harder. And then we have the ending of the song, which is just a repetition of the second chorus, because once again we have non mi hai tradito mai, forte compagnia, non ti ho mai detto addio, fragile. You never betrayed me, strong company, I never said goodbye to you, fragile. And the variation, if we compare it with the first chorus, is just as before, simply these three lines are repeated, while fragile, fragiles, is mentioned only at the end to close the song. So, and that was the analysis of the lyrics of Fragile, eighth track of Natura Morta by Folkstone, in this situation in featuring with Modena City Ramblers. Now, as I said, this was basically the first song where I could find some complaints. Let's put it like that. So, what was the problem? I lost my my gossip glasses. I lost the tea glasses. Also, like, these glasses have a bit of my god, the amount of dust in this house is unbearable. Like, I swear to God, we clean also quite often because I am allergic to dust, but dust keeps reforming like no tomorrow in seconds. Anyway, I'll go with this. So, what was the problem? The problem is that many of the fans of both Modena City Ramblers and Folkstone felt a bit disappointed. And I'm not making this up because I actually realized this when I went and read the comments under the video. Because this is one of the songs having a video clip accompanying it. Now, what's the problem here? The problem is, as I said at the beginning of the song, that it was considered too pop, and pretty much the audience was expecting something more metal and in line with the other tracks. Why? But also a problem concerning the lyrics. Why? Because in some interviews, Folkstone said that the featurings brought out a little bit more their political views. So the featurings were supposed to be a little bit more hot takes, if we can say it like that, because they had, like, the audience was expecting it to be a little bit more political, and they also confirmed it in some of the interviews, saying that the like the point of the featuring was to be a little bit more political, but there's nothing political or controversial in this song. It's very plain, if we really want to say it. Let's start with the music. The music, it's not very metal, it's very pop and borderline what you would expect for the opening of an anime series, which nothing bad with it, but it's not in line with the rest of the songs. It's a little bit out of context. The problem, it's not the anime opening style per se. The problem is that this musical style in this album feels a bit out of place. So it feels weird. I'm not I don't listen to metal songs mainly, but even I, after listening to all the previous one and listening this one, I was like, weird, unexpected. And there were people quite mad about it. But the main problem wasn't even the music, it was the lyrics. As I showed you, the lyrics are very pop-like. We have the classical pop song build, so not many words, quite simple. Generally, the lyrics of Folkstone tend to be more poetic. There is a bit of poetry, but less if compared to other lyrics. It has verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, and all of these sections are quite short. And the message is quite banal, to be honest. Like, yes, don't get me wrong, fragility is part of being human, okay? It's a very important part, and it's important to point it out even more nowadays, because due to the society we live in, which is heavily influenced by social media, fragility, imperfection, and everything that makes us human and vulnerable is put on the side. Even when people on social media tend to be more vulnerable, it feels quite calculated, because it's that very careful balance between appearing vulnerable enough to be relatable, but not too much, because otherwise your audience realize that you are a human being and you kind of have to meet certain standards of idealization. So actually, this is quite of a good point, but the way they point is out, so how important fragility is for human beings, how important it is for us to be fragile, vulnerable, full of flaws and whatnot, how can I say, falls flat. Because yes, the story is pretty much, we did many crazy things, then we felt this lack of inspiration, but then we came back together and we kept making music. Like, I get it, there is but it feels more like a draft of a good idea than a properly developed idea. Like, I don't know, maybe this was supposed to feel more flowed to match the topic, but if this was the idea, it failed a bit in my opinion. So I don't know. But what many people were pissed at even more is that this is the result of a featuring. With Modena City Ramblers, so how can I put this? Modena City Ramblers, back in their origins, were known to be very political. One of their most famous songs is Contessa. And it is a song whose lyrics is quite harsh. Like, I really suggest to go and listen to it and read and understand the lyrics. But it's a very hot take. Like, it's very pretty much sort of a communist song, sort of like same vibe of when the French beheaded their nobles. Sort of vibe. Like, it's very aggressive, it's very strong, that song. And that's just one example, and that is one of their most famous songs. So what happened? At certain point, Modena City Ramblers had a split, like they partially disbanded because they lost their frontman or something like that. But basically the person who wrote the previous lyrics of the previous songs, like the lyrics of the previous songs, which made Modena City Ramblers what they were. Now, what was the problem? That after they split, Modena City Ramblers tried to participate in events, and to be more accepted and mainstream, they took some of their old lyrics and changed them to be more family friendly, less controversial. And of course, the original author was mad about it, and I understandably so, because if you really want to be more accepted and more mainstream and more and less controversial, you just make your own songs, you go less punk, more pop, but at that point it's not even the same group anymore. So what was the issue? That some of the fans expected, like hoped in like something more controversial, something more political, something more like a stronger political stance, hoping that to see Modena City Ramblers as they used to be before, and seeing Folkstone in a more political light, because they are able to do that. We already saw that they had like some hot takes in previous tracks, and they also took some others hot takes in other tracks. So for how this song was presented, it fell a bit flat because it disappointed a bit and didn't match the expectations. Mainly considering the legacy of Modena City Ramblers, because Modena City Ramblers is quite of an old Italian group, niche of course, but quite old and back in the origin with quite clear, how can I put it, political views. Very, very on the left, very red, let's put it like that. And it makes sense, that was their identity. And here pretty much both the identity of Folkstone and the legacy of Modena City Ramblers is nowhere to be found. So I can understand why the fans were not the happiest. That said, I hope you enjoyed this analysis. Let me know in the comments if you are a fan of Folkstone or Modern City Ramblers, what you think about this track. That said, next time we are going to talk about Mediterraneo, another featuring this time with Trevor and Sadis. That said, hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Grazie everyone for watching and arrivederci.